Hi there, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for being with us today. We are at Creating the Future's Communication Strategy meeting. This is our third meeting. I am Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future. We will all be introducing ourselves. And if you are watching and tweeting, and I believe Magali is watching, at least I know that she has said that she wanted to. I don't know if others are. Please tweet to the hashtag Creating the Future. We are going to be watching that tweet stream, and we're not going to be watching if it doesn't have the hashtag. We're not going to be watching. We're going to be paying attention here. So as we ask questions here, please tweet in your responses, tweet in what you're thinking about. And it's delightful to have folks in all kinds of ways, especially here on the screen with us. Let's just go around, and if you all will tell us your name, tell us where you are, if you want to share what your weather is, if it's in particularly weird or wonderful. And tell us something that is exciting in your life these days. And let's start with Peter.
Hi, I am Peter Panapenso. I am in Columbia, Maryland, and am the philanthropic practice leader for Turn 2 Communications. We do a lot of work with nonprofits and foundations in the space, and have been highly engaged with Hildy and her vision for catalytic thinking and creating the future for some time now, and are really excited to be part of this work. What is exciting to me right now is the end of the year, and kind of building some new relationships with some folks that we haven't worked with in the past, continuing others, and being very thankful for what's been a really interesting and productive year.
Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful. Sue, I know that I will warn the group. You don't have to. I will warn the group that Sue has lost her voice a little bit, which is an interesting thing, because we were talking before about the fact that we don't have to worry about things being contagious when we're online like this.
That's right. That's right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Kindred. I'm a business strategist for nonprofits located in Richmond, Virginia. So, Peter, I'm just down the road from you a bit. And I have been engaged with Creating the Future for some time now. I love the work. And one of the things that's really exciting for me is that I just got back from Chicago last weekend, which is probably where all this came from. And I'm working with a client, a national client that has really blown up its organizational structure, completely turned everything on its head. And we're so excited to be walking in this new path. And I think that these conversations about what is possible, what this kind of new thinking makes possible, how we engage people in the process, how we not scare them about the uncertainty and the ambiguity that's going to come along with that. And I think that this is really exciting for me to be able to learn from you guys, share a little bit about my experience if it's relevant, and to understand how to best help my clients and others who are contemplating doing something very similar. So very excited to be here.
Well, when you have your voice back, I want to know all about how they're structuring, what they're structuring, because that's been such a huge part of our work over the past several years.
This organization is going to a flattened hierarchy that's very much modeled on the distributed authority model of holacracy. Not 100%, but that is a very similar model to what we're putting together.
We will definitely talk, you and me, this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on, I've got to save my coffee here. The dog is in the room.
Uh-oh, first things first.
Yeah. Sorry.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you're here. And Dimitri, where are you? And
I am about 5 feet to your left in the office. I'm with Creating the Future. I've been following Creating the Future probably since it started, so I've been around for a while. It's a couple things. One,
make sure it's loud.
We had our board meeting on Monday, our most recent board meeting, which was quite exciting. We have a new board member that is going to add some great new energy and further the conversation in the direction that you're talking about, Sue, of creating something completely different. So it'll be pretty amazing. I'm excited and looking forward to it. And also, it's just really nice outside, and looking forward late today taking a bike ride. So that's on personal what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I am, yeah, as far as just describing to people what goes on with Dimitri and my mics, we generally hand the mic back and forth because literally he's there. And if both of us are on, then it echoes and it reverberates and it's ugly. So we will hand the mic back and forth throughout the meeting. I am Hildy Gottlieb. I am also located in Tucson, Arizona, where it is sunny and beautiful. It's probably in the high 50s now, may get into the 60s today. So many things are exciting. I'm not sure if I should say this to the two of you, but being in a place where we garden all year long, where it doesn't snow, it doesn't freeze very much. We've got a beautiful winter garden that it's been raining on and off. This is a part of our rainy season here in the desert, and just watching everything go is just sort of fun. I stand at the kitchen window and I do the dishes and I look out, and it's like watching corn grow. To me, that's fun. I'm a gardener. So that's been awesome. And I just love this time of year. We're going to spend this weekend baking. Dimitri bakes baklava, and that is a big part of the presents that we give to folks. And next week we get to go around to all the people we love and deliver it. So it's just, I love this time of year. I love putting presents together for people. I love giving presents. I love, yeah, it's just, so that is exciting with us these days. And again, if you are out in the Twitterverse and you are watching this, and tweet to us and tell us what's going on in your life. Tell us where you are, who you are, and that will be awesome. I wanted to take a moment and to sort of bring us back up to speed here on where we've been. For those of us who've been in the conversation since we started in September, it's been a while. So that's bringing up to speed, and to those who are new to the conversation, it is sort of grounding us. The goal of this plan is really creating Future's mission, which is to see systems in the world. And we define systems as how people do things. So it could be workplace systems, it could be community systems, it could be any kind of system. To see systems that are actually bringing out the best in people. And so really giving people the ability to change the systems that they find themselves in through the questions that they ask, so that those systems are bringing out the best in people rather than suspecting the worst in people. As you will have seen in the summaries of the meetings that we've had so far, the first thing that we asked is, who will see our messages? This is a communication strategy. Who will see our messages? And we want to make sure that we're not narrowly defining a target audience and only speaking to them, because what we know is that when we ignore people who will be touched by some action, they're going to be touched by it either way. And we can, as much as possible, avoid unintended consequences if we actually include them in our thinking. And so we talked about all the people that would see our messages, from leaders of change efforts, activists, people who may want to be activists but don't know how, don't know what steps that they can take, teachers who teach capacity building, who teach how to change the world, students, community members, and we just listed all of those folks and then asked, what are the outcomes that those messages could create for them? If we had our dreams for everyone who will see our messages, what would we want those messages to create for those individuals? The crux of it really came down to that folks are able to connect with other people who want the same results that they do. And that could be connecting with us, it could be connecting with each other, But if we are going to really see systems change ripple throughout the world, if every one of those connections has to come through us, nothing's going to change. So the goal of having people connect with each other, feel a sense of agency to create change, feel the courage that it takes sometimes to create change in systems. See the context, start a new conversation. That's what we really want these messages to make possible for folks. Because if our messages can create those results, systems will change. If people feel agency to create systems change, systems will change. If they know how, if they know the questions to ask, if they see the context, things will change. And that's our goal. Our goal would be to not have to keep doing this and go do something else, because everything is changed and life is good. Today, what we're going to do is, the first thing we'll do is review the list of conditions that we came up with in that second meeting, just to make sure, did we miss anything? Is there anything that, as you reviewed stuff, that you would add? From there, we will unpack the conditions that we've already come up with. Asking again if you all have seen any of the talks, whether it's my TED talk or something. What we're doing is we're reverse engineering the result we want. We're walking backwards from that result, and we're asking, okay, what would it take for that to happen? What would it take for that to happen? If one of the things that leads to systems change is that people feel agency, okay, what would it take for people to feel agency? And then what would it take for that? And then what would it take for that? And what we find is that eventually that narrows down, and we will know what actions to take. And our actions will be intended to topple that first domino so that all those other dominoes topple down. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We'll first start in with just the question of, as you all looked at the list of what we came up with last time, the list of conditions we came up with last time, did anything occur to you to add? Was there anything that you saw that was missing in terms of what would people need to feel and know? What would they need to be assured of in order to reach for that connection with each other, connection, and feel that sense of agency? Anything occur to you all as you read? I love, Sue, that you can just shake your head and you don't have to say anything. That works. Turn the heat down a little bit.
Sure.
I thought it was a good list.
How about you, Peter? Anything spark for you as you were? You're muted, Peter.
I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at the right list of things. So this is in the conditions for success document, right?
Yes, and it is either the conditions for success PDF, which is a really long list, or the summary of that in the blog post that linked to that.
Right. I think as I look through this, I mean, I think that it captures a lot of what we had unearthed in these earlier conversations. And really, this is about the sense of what's possible and what we can accomplish by thinking and acting differently. So I think this captures so much of that.
Great. Awesome. So then let's start to unpack some of that. And let's start with people having a sense of what is possible, because it's such a big piece of what we know is needed. Nobody's going to do anything differently if they don't sense something is possible. What does it take for people to sense what is possible? What does it take for people? What do people need to know? What do they need to feel? What do they need to be assured of? To know that they can change the systems they find themselves in, that we can actually, there's so much conversation nowadays, whether it is changing how philanthropy is done, changing how organizations are structured, Just in the community benefit world, there's so much talk about changing how economic systems are structured in the world at large, changing power dynamics. What does it take for people to know that that change is possible? Yeah, Sue.
So as I read through all of this and I'm thinking about that and I'm experiencing this with the client that I'm dealing with, and we're having one-on-one conversations with all the people in this new model. And it is exactly that. It is about what can we make possible. What I'm struck by is how each person approaches the conversation from a different thinking process. So I was just reading an article about Temple Grandin and the way people approach thinking. I just went through this with another client who is what I would call a mind map thinker, right? She thinks in visual circles. And for people who think linearly, it's a very difficult conversation to have across that divide. We would often come to the same conclusion, but we would reach it in different ways. So you have people, the other thing that I'm experiencing through this process is people want a visual. I can't believe it unless I can see it. And I think that so how can we make it possible? There has to be a multi-fronted opportunity for people to not only see themselves in that space, but to see themselves in that space in the way in which they think, in the way in which they problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that.
Let's give you the floor.
Yeah, this is we're passing the talking stick back and forth in here.
Cool.
I'm wondering if it needs to be in multiple different ways, so that
Yes.
I really appreciate what you're saying, Sue, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I believe that there's many different ways of expressing that, or at least people will can identify with many different ways. Some
Absolutely.
with a particular, some with a different.
Well, and they all approach it.
Hello to Magali, who is tweeting saying,
You're muted. Hilda, you're muted. You're both muted right now. You can't hear Hilda.
we'll get used to this. You would think after all this time that we would be used to it. I am saying hello, that Magali is here. She is tweeting, and her tweet says, "Hi, Magali, French fundraiser settled in San Francisco." So we are very, very happy that you are here. The thought that occurs, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but it is very clear that messages sort of need to meet people where they are in the way they think. And I love that thought, Sue, that it's people have multiple ways of processing, multiple ways of absorbing information, and then multiple ways of processing it. So they may need to hear it. Some may need to see it. Some may need to see it in text. Some may need to see it visually. Some do better with video. Some do better. And
sometimes in multiple ways of that. You know, the new marketing paradigm, it used to be that you had to be in front of somebody 7 times for them to actually hear it or process it. And that new number is 17 because of all the different ways that we receive our information. Wow. So they may need to see it visually and orally. They may need to see it kinesthetically. They may need to be able to have a visual of it, to touch it. And then they're going to process it through their own lens. You know, when I teach storytelling, we say that a person doesn't hear the story that you're telling. They run it through the filter of their own experience to make it make sense for them. And the person who's receiving this realm of possibility is going to do the same thing. They're going to run it through the lens of their own experience to see what makes sense to them in that moment. Through the whole conversations I've been having in this paradigm that I'm working with this client, the one thing that I was absolutely not prepared for, we're talking huge tectonic changes and a ginormous vision. And I was not prepared for, you mean I don't have a title anymore? It was a shift in my thinking. I was like, oh, they're hearing this, they're processing it at a totally different level than I'm sharing it.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. Very much so. And there's there's that piece of there's something threatening about thinking about things in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're threatening the status quo. And so sensing what is possible doesn't always land in a joyful way.
It does not. You're asking people to step out of their comfort zone. And that comes with a sense of uncertainty, ambiguity, no stable ground underneath them. And you're asking them to do something that is really a fundamental different way of being in the world. And it many times is not comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see that shift because we feel like, because we see it, we can see the vision, can feel the vision, we know where we're going. We have all those pieces in place because it's ours, right? We've given birth to this idea of what does whatever make possible. But you nailed it, Hildy, when you said it does not always land joyfully. And we have a tendency to believe that it will.
Right.
If they can just see what we can see, they're going to be really wildly excited about it. And the reality is, even if they can see what we can see, they might not be wildly joyful about it. They might be cautious and scared and uncertain and full of distrust. Have we maintained the thread of trust through this whole visioning process? It's hard to say.
What you're saying, Sue, really makes me think about a person's identity and what makes up their identity, and how these changes really have to take into account that people have to see themselves in a new way.
Absolutely.
And so much of who we are is tied up in things like my title, what I'm used to doing, how other people see me. So that acceptance is so tied up in identity. And how do you shift that?
Absolutely. I have heard more times than I can count in all these conversations. I've been working this process for a year and we've rolled it out to members since September. And what I keep hearing is, I don't see myself in this plan.
I don't see myself in it.
You're in this plan and we can help them walk to that point. But it is not an innate ability to see yourself in this plan. And that's the feedback we're getting. I guess I could be excited about it, except I don't see myself in here.
So in terms of what it takes for people to see what is possible, first of all, it is defining what is possible as the ability to change the systems they find themselves in, so that those systems are bringing out the best in people. Seeing, if you're in a workplace environment, let's say, what are systems that might bring out the best in folks rather than punish them, rather than wait for them to mess up. And I'm thinking about personnel policies and HR kinds of things, where frequently the message that they're receiving is, we know you're going to mess up. Here's what we're going to try to do to prevent you from messing up. Here's the rules that if you follow them, you won't be messing up. And when you do mess up, here's what you can expect. And that so much of it is around the assumption that at some point you're going to mess up and we want to prevent you from messing up. To be able to see myself in systems change, to be able to say, I want a system that is aiming at bringing out the best in me as an employee. And if they're bringing out the best in me, then maybe they don't have to suspect the worst. Okay, what would that look like for me? And we've talked a lot about people need examples, but I think what we're getting at here is they need examples that they can try on for themselves.
Absolutely.
That this is not examples of, oh, here's what we've seen over here. This is examples of, here, picture this for you.
Yeah, it can't be abstract.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's a thread that runs through there that says we are making a presumption that people want that paradigm when their comfort zone is in the other paradigm.
Oh yeah.
Right? So we're asking them to want something that they can't yet feel or see.
One of the practices that is a deepening practice of catalytic listening at Creating the Future is called the Continuum of Potential. And what the continuum acknowledges is that everybody is at a different stage in their own reaching for their potential. And we've identified 7 stages that people go through in reaching for their potential in whatever place. I mean, and we're all at different points on that continuum about something else. When it comes to your professional potential, you may be over here, and when it comes to getting in shape, you may be over here. But there's stages people go through in their readiness to step into change for themselves. And what we have learned working with the continuum is that nobody is solidly in one stage. They always have a foot in the stage before because they came out of it, and a foot into the next stage because that's sort of where they're wanting to aim at. And
Yeah.
it's really, I think that there's a deep amount of compassion and empathy that needs to be, it doesn't need to be blatantly explicit in the messages, but I think that it needs to be an underlying piece of it to say this is not a, hey, you're really, there's a big piece. We talked so much in past conversations about honoring the people who are seeing the message. Because we've all seen so many messages that are everything you've been doing has been screwing up. And you think you're doing well, but everything you've been doing has been screwed. Well, I'm not thinking kindly of you, and I'm turning the page and I'm moving on. So I think there's a big piece there. And another thought that occurred to me in all of this is if the message needs to, in order for people to see what's possible, it needs to be personal for them and something that they want. And there's something powerful in creating the future. There's something powerful in our messages asking that question. Asking, what systems do you want to change? And bringing, I don't know what those messages are yet, and I don't know how it will work, and we don't need to figure that out right now, but there's something intriguing about a message that creates a conversation in somebody else's own head. And I don't know what that is, but there's something exciting about that.
Yeah, and I think that's what and we've kind of touched on this in other conversations too. This isn't even us telling people what they want or what the future that we want. It's about helping them define what they want to achieve and giving them the tools to not only define what it is, but get other people on board with them to do it. This is as much a engagement strategy as it is kind of a straight marketing and messaging strategy.
Very much so. Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is exciting. I'm scribbling. What else leads to folks seeing what's possible and seeing themselves inside of that? What do they need to feel? What do they need to be assured of? And we've talked a lot about the trepidation, the potential for, some people embrace change and most people are like, yeah, I know it would be good for me. I don't want to do it anyway. What
It
if people
feels like
short of?
it feels like they need to have a brotherhood. To me, it feels like they need to have the assurances that through all of these questions and all of these possibilities, that they are not being asked to do this by themselves.
Yeah, so much of what we were talking about coming out of the first meeting and identifying probably the most important result that we wanted to aim for is people connecting with us and with each other, us as just one piece of each other. And that's such a big piece of all of it is creating that connection. And I'll wait until Roxanne gets all settled in. And
oh, I'm sorry. I hope you got my message.
we did get your message, and I will take a moment and just sort of bring you up to speed so that you can dive in here. Everybody, this is Roxanne. Roxanne, this is Sue and Peter and Dimitri, and we have Magali, who is out in the Twitterverse, and potentially some others who are watching and tweeting. What we've been doing, Roxanne, is really starting to unpack. We started by asking, and I would ask you if in the lists of what needs to be in place for us to feel that connection to each other, feel that connection of what is possible, and connect to systems change, the potential in systems change. First of all, if you saw anything that you thought was missing, that you would add to that list. And what we've been doing is just sort of unpacking a little bit. What would it take for people to sense what is possible? What would it take for people to have a sense of agency? Was there anything that you noticed that jumped out at you that was missing from that list?
Well, I guess I missed the session. So is it, the intent is around building a movement? Is that like the big picture?
The big intent is sort of joining a movement that's already in place to change the systems that people find themselves in, so that those systems are bringing out the best in people. And we hear people talking about changing economic systems. We hear people talking about changing workplace systems, from the mundane to the sublime. And the intent is to activate that kind of change, so that people, when they are thinking about their own systems, that they have the tools and they're creating the change in their own systems that bring out the best in folks.
Okay, so it's getting more and more people in. The idea is to get more and more people into that mindset, right?
Very much so.
And so I thought the one thing that might be worthwhile digging into is some real strategic partnerships with people who it may not be the same mission, but I think the overarching mission is to make the world a better place and to make people happy. And so I'm just going to go on for half a second, and then, because I don't like people who dominate these meetings, but I won't. So I think that the mindfulness movement, which really caught on and almost became a buzz thing to do, Google hired mindfulness people. I think now it's probably a year or two in, there's a happiness movement. Ben Shahar wrote a book called Happier. There's a lot of Emma Sapala, do you know who she is?
No.
She heads up the happiness school at Berkeley. I mean, it's becoming an academic. So just referencing those two, there's also mindful leadership in organization. There's it might be worth really digging in to how to use those partnerships for their benefit. And everyone has the same idea: make the world a better place, make people happier, and then the world will be a better place. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you.
To listen.
And it is quite timely, because really what we're talking about is connecting. is if the goal is connecting with people who, people and organizations who care about the same things. And we know that our messages are going to be seen by folks who may never connect with us, but encouraging them to connect with others and connect with each other. Sort of unpacking, okay, what does it take for folks to make that connection? They're going to see our messages. What does it take? What do people need to have in order to step into that place of making those connections? And something is striking me from the conversation that we've been having. We talked about the fact that people need to see that they're not going to be walking the path by themselves, that there will be others alongside them. I think that there's a big piece in just you having identified a couple of organizations, movements, entities that make sense for us to connect with. I think one of the things that people need to see is who would they connect with. So I'm in a food bank someplace, I don't know where, but this is really appealing. And I've heard this, I've been hearing about this thing, and but I don't know who I would connect with to create systems change within the food. Would I reach out to other food banks? Would I reach out, as you mentioned, Roxanne, to people who don't necessarily have the same mission? I think there's a whole big thing of what people need to know in order to connect, to sort of spark who they might connect with. Again, if this is personal, if I'm receiving the message and I'm thinking of it through my own lens, I think one of the things that people would need to know is, oh, wow, I could connect with that group. And even though they're not directly related, that would somehow connect. So I think it's helping people see the possibilities for connection, the unlikely suspects, the unlikely connections, the unlikely allies.
One of the things I mentioned earlier was that, this group that I'm working with is looking at the concept of holacracy. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but within that paradigm structure, they call the groups that come together circles. And that feels really relevant here because you're looking at circles of connectivity, you're looking at circles of influence, you're looking at circles of like-minded thinking. And within those circles, you have that Venn diagram of where does all of this overlap.
Yeah. What else do people need to see and feel and know, understand, in order to see that sense of personal agency and maybe take steps and start new conversations? What else do they need to know? What else do they need to feel?
Well, I think it helps if there can be some relevant real life examples of how this approach works. And it can be in small ways or it can be in big ways, but where people don't have to imagine what it looks like, but can actually get their hands around something tangible that is a proof of concept.
I love it.
And it has to be honest and it has to be
I
real.
also think, and this is sort of keying off some of the things that you talked about, Sue, is you're not leaping without some kind of safety net. That there is, for lack of a better way of saying it, there's a way to step back if this feels really uncomfortable. There's something that allows you to feel, I've got a parachute on. Yes, I'm jumping out of a plane, but I have a parachute on. So I can jump out and I can at least feel that, it may be scary for a while, but, I'll be okay. So some of that obviously is done through example of others who have done this, but also I'm just trying to think other ways of creating that sense of safety.
You also have a tandem jumper with you.
I like it. We'll share a parachute.
Exactly.
I'm almost thinking about what we do with our e-journal, which is give people a way to put a toe in. Giving people a way that messages that give people a way to try something. Try this question. See what happens.
It's kind of like what I'm going through right now. My kids have turned vegetarian. And so for this lifelong carnivore to go, you know what, I'm going to take and try and do 20% of shift my diet, 20%, right? And recognize that that's a big shift, right? That's a big shift. And I think it has applicability here in that you don't have to eat the whole thing all at one time, right?
Yes, yes. I think there's, I think there's a couple different, come on, Hildy, find your words. Sometimes change is really scary. A lot of people find living in uncertainty very scary. And we reinforce that with messages that say change is scary. So there's something there. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something there about the whole thing that you just said, Sue. You don't have to bite this whole thing off, and we don't have to say change is scary. We can say you can make tiny incremental changes, and a tiny incremental thing that may not feel like a big thing is actually can create big ripples. That if you change one question in one conversation, and just try that little thing and see what happens. Yeah.
I said two things in my training this last week, and we did about 16 hours of training, which is probably why my voice sounds like this. But I said two things. One, stuck is harder than change. Always. And two, old ways won't open new doors. And I think if everybody will come to the table agreeing that something new is not as scary as change, right? Because the intent is, or the belief system is, that you're going to fold new into what you already know and have. Not that you're changing, but that you're folding something new into your comfort zone. You're inviting it in as opposed to stepping out into it. And those are two very different things. And I saw a lot of moments around the table when we were talking about the difference between inviting something in and stepping outside the comfort zone.
And that grows the comfort zone.
It does.
That whole meme about the more we step outside the comfort zone expands.
Exactly, but they don't need to hear that.
They don't need to
They will just experience it.
They don't need to hear that. One of our fellows, Trey, talks about change happening by linking the new to the known.
Yes, exactly.
And I really like that. Because the messages, whatever the messages are, whether they are a feature article or a tweet, they are going to be heard by people who are, yes, I really need to be thinking about changing the system that I work in, let's say, my workplace. And there is going to be also people who are going to say, oh, if my employees get hold of this, they're going to want to change our workplace, and that scares the poo out of me.
Mhm.
So
Or
yeah,
if
yeah.
if this one little thing were different, what would that mean? Right? So they're going to read the article and they're going to either be all in, they're going to be partially in, they're going to go, that's an interesting concept. And they're going to process it like we talked about earlier. How do we process all of this information and shift our thinking in incremental time lapse?
There's something really big in your saying stuck is harder than change. It is and it isn't. In terms of the brain science, we stay stuck because because the unknown is scary. And so the change means unknown, and unknown the way our brains work. And it's coming back to those examples and stories that we've been talking about, because we are such visual creatures. If we can't see it, it scares us. It's why we're scared of the dark. If we can't see, it scares us. And so there's got to be something that they can see that encourages them beyond the stuck. And again, a lot of the pieces in there is actually a stuck stage in the Continuum of Potential. So when I was talking about this, we go through stages. We go through a stage of stuck. And I'm thinking about people who feel threatened by change, because there are people who are going to feel threatened by change. Whether it's their power, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is sharing power. A lot of what we're talking about is shifting paradigms of who gets to have power, who has it, who holds it. And there's a big, and they're stuck in that. I have to have the power, I have to hold the power. And what's occurring to me is what we know helps people get beyond stuck is understanding in a completely unemotional, completely non-aspirational way. There's no emotion in it whatsoever. A scientific, logical explanation of why they're stuck, what the system is that is keeping them stuck. And it's identifying the things that, even though they're in that comfort zone, the stuff they don't like anyway.
So I'm sitting here processing all of that, and I'm going to push back just a little bit. I think that the reason people change, it's my perception only, but I believe that the reason that people change is because the pain of staying the same is too great. And so that doesn't have a logical component to it, right? You can't logic your way out of that into change, I don't think.
They need, here's what we found, is that the pain can be great for a really, really long time. Mm-hmm. And they can stay stuck for a really, really long time. What will give them the pathway out is understanding what's at the root of what's keeping them in. And that's the logical part. That's the non-emotional. So for instance, you've got, and I'm going to do this because it's easy. It's organizational stuff, but it works on the personal stuff just as well. The organization that has for 30 years lived off of grants. So, all of us in this particular room are in the community benefit world, where we understand what goes on. They've lived on grants, and they're constantly chasing grants, and they're feeling stuck. They can't get out of that loop, because every time you suggest, well, here's the 9 other things you could be doing, they've got 10 million reasons why they can't do that. And once they see This is what's keeping you stuck. So it's not, oh, you're stuck, you need to get out of that, but this is what's keeping you stuck. These systems, this is what's, and so for you to get out of that, you need to acknowledge these systems are keeping you stuck. And here's what you can put a toe into to try to see how that shifts that. The one thing that psychologists have found over time is if we make a huge leap out of stuck, there's a very good chance our behaviors will revert. And so it is encouraging folks to make a step out of, and again, I know we're really focusing on folks who are in that stuck sort of place. But that big piece about moving out, again, giving folks a toe that they can put in, I think is just really, really important so that they can experience it and that can become their new, oh, I like this. So I think there's a big piece there for people who are feeling threatened by it.
So, and I'm probably asking these questions because I've missed a lot of the meetings.
Okay.
So, do people who are stuck know they're stuck?
Mm.
And so if they know they're stuck, I feel like that's more of the audience. The potential audience, at least I always think of audience as a bullseye when we're doing communications. You know, you've got your inner circle of you, the people like you, maybe like us. Then you've got the next circle who probably the very enthusiastic funders. And then as you move out, you're building your advocates, you're building your volunteers, you're building your soldiers. And your last circle really is the media. Your strategic partners would probably be the third circle once you start gathering them. So when you think about resources, messaging, and target audience as well, usually we go a little slower than broad. We try to go narrower so that the people who you're really reaching who will get it will start building up an audience. But and again, this is a question I'm asking you. So that if we focus on stuck, which sounds like a good idea, I'm sure there's other ways to look at it. But there's a lot of work being done around stuck. Tony Robbins, I'm just finishing up a coaching course on energy leadership. I mean, it's all around unstuck.
Right.
Getting unstuck.
Right. What I'm liking about what you're talking about, we've talked about this quite a bit and there's some links that if you haven't seen them, I can send to you, that we very intentionally do not narrow our focus on a target audience. It is by design. And again, it's just where catalytic thinking takes us. However, the thought that there are ripples, that a big piece of what we're talking about are messages that will be heard by somebody who, this makes great sense to me. I'm going to tweet it out. I'm going to repost it on Facebook. I'm going to read whatever it is. I'm going to share this because it's going to resonate with them immediately. And some of what we've been talking about in other meetings is the ability, what people need to have in order to create those connections is language that is easy to articulate and to share. So that if what we want are ripples, people need to have stuff that is easy to get, that isn't convoluted, that is simple. It doesn't necessarily have to be soundbitey, but what is it that makes that something that they will, again, as part of their connecting, when they connect and they're starting new conversations, what they need in order to start new conversations is stuff, the fodder of the conversations. It's a lot easier to start a conversation with, I heard this thing the other day. So what do people need in order to start new conversations? If what we want is them to be starting those conversations that will create those connections, what do they need to have? What do they need to know in order to start those? And it could be conversations at the dinner table. It could be conversations in the workplace, at staff meetings. What do people need to have in order to start new conversations?
Because my understanding was that the communications was around building the movement and awareness. I didn't, and it make, what makes sense what you're saying, but now it seems like, and this is for clarification, that it's around communications once the connections are made, the tools, communications tools, or is it both?
If we want folks to start new conversations about what is possible, if we want folks to be changing, let's say inside a workplace, to start new conversations towards systems change in that workplace, what do they need to have in order to start those new conversations? What do they need to know?
Okay, so then what do we need to say to them to get them to start the conversations? And
nope, what they need to have, even if we're not starting, even if it's not our message. If folks are going to start a new conversation in their workplace, what do they need to have, whether we're giving it to them or not? What do they need to have?
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to have a reason to have the conversation in the first place.
Talk more about it. If you have voice, talk more about it.
Well, we don't. Let me think on that. There just has to be a reason to raise the issue, right? So is that a level of excitement around something that's possible? Is it a level of
Frustration,
uncertainty or frustration
mm-hmm.
that they're wanting to get buy-in on? But there has to be some reason for them to initiate that conversation other than just making small talk.
I keep coming back to asking, what systems do you want to change? That there's a piece in there about it not being a one-way message. Peter, you mentioned before it being an engagement. That there's a really big piece here about our engaging those conversations as a model.
It feels to me like those conversations are the rock, right? It starts smaller. When I hear you say, what systems do we want to change? And we're starting this conversation, that feels too big to me.
Right. And I'm using our language.
Sure.
It's finding language that resonates with people, but it is suddenly what's occurring to me. So I'm picturing a workplace. People are having conversations about workplace systems, and they're not calling it that. They're calling it, I'm so frustrated because this thing won't let me do whatever.
Yeah.
I can't get this done. This thing is stopping me. What sparked for me as what you were talking about, so is that they're already having conversations. It's shifting. So if you're having these kinds of conversations, it's shifting those conversations of things that aren't working towards things that can work. It is taking the negative conversations and giving them a tool that moves them out of that negative loop.
So is it giving them a tool, or is it giving them more questions to ask?
That's the tool. Yeah. One of the interesting things, Roxanne, when in terms of using catalytic thinking for anything, and including communication strategy, is that it goes against the way that we generally ask questions in these kinds of strategies, because usually we start very quickly into what will we do and who and what is our action. And what we look at first is, if even if we weren't here, if this is the result that we want for people out in the world, what do they need? And the more we can define what they need, the more our actions will become very, very obvious in what we need to. So for instance, we've been talking a lot about they need to see examples. Oh yeah, we can do that. We can come up with. And so it just makes it is a little bit different mindset. And I know that sometimes that's a little twisty.
Yeah, that call, I'm sorry, I got distracted for a minute. I'm in the middle of everything. I'm taking care of aging parents, and I think my mother's at the doctor, and I'm going to have to excuse myself for half a second. However, I was on when you said that, I couldn't agree more. In fact, the work we do, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. We tell any client who comes to us, we don't care what you think. We care who you think your audience is. And then we need to ask them if what you think is true. So am I hearing that? Yeah. That, oh, I couldn't agree more. And it's just the whole methodology behind that I think is a system that we have. And it's making me think about that system maybe a little more, because we're strategic sharp. How do we thread that human element through it? And actually, Hildy, on an aside, that's why I'm excited to meet with you in Tucson to run some of these ideas by you. But yeah, I hear you. I'm going to excuse. I'm sorry.
Go.
I'll be back.
Totally understand that. Totally understand. There's a piece in here, and I think we keep coming back to what do people need in order to feel agency? To feel, oh, I can create change. I didn't think I could do that. I'm not in a position of power. I didn't think I could do that.
I brought up examples before, and I think if we, not only are we trying to empower people and to come up with their own messages and kind of build their own movements, but I think we're needing to show them that this works in some way. And I think by showing them people who are relatable, who are seeing change, whether it's small or large, using this approach. So I think the more we can show people rather than telling them that this is valuable and important, the better.
Yep. And what that's raising for me, Peter, is in so many different circumstances.
Yes.
In so many different circumstances. And yeah, from the individual and personal to the community and corporate and whatever, but so much of what catalytic thinking actually helps with are the interpersonal systems that we have that we don't call systems, that are this is just how my husband and I talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And so seeing it in seeing it in different ways in different realms, and then what eventually will happen is we will narrow down and say, okay, our primary focus is going to be these kinds of conversations in these kinds of settings, because you can't be everything to everybody, and we know that.
Right.
But narrowing down coming later rather than at the beginning, I think that there's a big piece in there that is even just the aside of saying, oh yeah, and by the way, I had an interesting conversation with my husband the other day, and I asked that same question, and it was amazing there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is expectation and maybe a redefinition of what change is. what you're describing here. And by redefinition, I'm talking about, what they perceive, can I change my organization? What does that mean? And as you're suggesting, it may simply be asking different questions, which leads to people going, oh, or why, or I had never thought of that, or whatever. They've affected change just by virtue of that mindset and that ability to be comfortable asking a question.
Dimitri, what you just said makes me think that we all come to the table with a different definition of what change is and what change means to us. And I'm wondering if there is not a word library that we could create that is indicative of all the things that change is and all the things that change are, so that we are not using language that feeds into someone else's stereotype.
Yeah. Language, story, examples. There's also some people, you're talking about what the different kinds of people and the way that they think, what they need to know in order to step into something new. Some people need stories, some people need facts, some people need science, some people, so I think that there's really the acknowledgement of, there's a breadth of what people need to know. Some people are, just in my own conversations, some people glom on to the brain science. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And the questions that they start repeating in their workplace, I'm thinking of one person in particular, the questions that she has started in her workplace are always, now what part of the brain do you think that's going to trigger? And it's fascinating to me. It never occurred to me that that would be common lexicon that becomes common lexicon in that workplace. But that's the place that made sense to her. And that's the question that she's always asking. And in other cases, it's stories. Don't you want to be like the X group? And so, I mean, it's really, really interesting that to again, not get stuck in one way of giving the message, to listen to how people receive messages. And it's one of the internal things that we would need to know is to ask, what are the different ways people link in their brains, the new to the known? Is it through story? Is it through science? Is it through?
And I think too, asking the question, what does change mean to you? And it's also true that when people come to that concept, they come to it from totally different places. I might come to it with the fact that I just went through a change that was really positive, or I went through a change that was really negative. And so I'm going to come to the table with preconceived ideas about what change is and what it isn't. And if we give them this word library, allowing them to understand that change might come with wearing a different hat, it might be more powerful.
I'm like picturing a campaign of questions at this point. I'm like picturing it is. I keep coming back to what you said earlier, Peter, that this is about, if we look at this through the lens of engagement, and messages that engage, actions that engage, projects that engage.
Hildy, I'm going to call in, talk about a system that needs to change. The caretaking medical, oh, yeah. Anyway.
You go.
No, I'm not going. I'm
Okay.
not going mentally. I'm going to connect by phone.
Okay.
Stay on the call.
Okay.
That's okay. All right, because this is too compelling to miss.
Okay, so one of the things that people need in order to stay engaged is something needs to be too compelling to miss. I'm like not kidding. That was just a sort of throwaway, but that really is what it has to be.
And the very precise piece of that is different ways in which to connect. She could connect through Zoom, she could connect by phone. There are different modalities in different ways to connect.
Yes, and things are compelling when they have to do with me.
You know, I'm going back to the,
I'm going to give you the mic.
I'm going back to the variety of methods of communication. And one of my favorite metaphors, and I kind of think through metaphor, is an ecosystem. That, you know, I have an environment that is a monoculture. And it, without tremendous energy, will devolve into a variety of plants and creatures and animals. And I think that messages are sort of like that. That, you know, unless you can be pumping out one message, you know, Coca-Cola constantly, if you want people to drink things that are good for them, it's going to vary. It's going to be all kinds of things. And so it's going to create an ecosystem out there. And part of how I'm envisioning this process is that it's many different methods of communication, many different messages, many different connections, many different ways of seeing myself, many different ways of interacting, but all moving in the same general direction, all creating this environment of this, because that's what has staying power, not you know, this is my message and, you know, my message or the highway. You know, it is all of it.
There's a piece there about interconnection. There's a piece there about one of the things Anne mentioned during our last meeting and mentions frequently is an exercise that when I used to do workshops when I was still consulting, and I used to do workshops and I would ask a room of 100 people, somebody stand up and tell us your mission. And you'd have an arts group and you'd have a food bank and you'd have a rehab group and you'd have and et cetera, et cetera. And I'd say, wow, you all have really different missions, don't you? And they'd go, yeah. And I'd say, well, no, actually you have one mission. You all want the community to be a healthy, vibrant, beautiful place to live. And you're all doing little different parts of it. And helping them find those connections. I did an exercise recently with a group when I was actually doing a keynote and had them do it as an exercise among them. Was that, and I had them do it because I knew the people in the room. I had the sign up sheet ahead of time, and I knew that out of 50 people in the room, this was a 1 hour gig that I was doing with a small group. 50 people in the room, I knew that only one of them was from an environmental group. And so I had them get into groups of 4 or 5, and I said, go around very quickly, tell what your mission is, get that out of the way so that we know who everybody is and what hat you're wearing. Everyone here now find the connection between all of those missions and climate change. And I knew they were all social service organizations, almost to the one. They were all human services. What is the link between your mission and climate change? And what it did was it sparked for them that all of their missions were interconnected, and that no matter what it was, they could all find a link between their mission and climate change. And so there's something in what you're saying, Dimitri, the ecosystem piece of it, of emphasizing the interconnected threads. That's sort of what's sparking for me as you're talking about it, that this is what Joe did in this environment, and here's 3-4 other environments that look different but could apply. So there's just something there in terms of we all think our stuff is so special, and we all think it's unique, and and that's the place. We do all think it's unique. Again, putting on the consulting hat from when we were consulting years ago, almost to the one when someone would call with a problem, they thought they were the only one. And so there's a real piece here in terms of normalizing some of the things that people experience, that you're not alone, there are others. It was the whole thing that we were talking about before, that there's others to walk the path with you. That others, and it may be in a completely different, it may not be in somebody that's got your mission or whatever it is you're doing. It may be a completely different workplace, but that you're not alone, that others, it's not that you're not alone stepping into this new question that you may be asking, but you're not alone in feeling what you're feeling, that this is really normal and that others are feeling that as well. I think there's something big there in the normalizing piece.
I'm gonna unmute them. You know, at the beginning, when we started this session today, Hildy was talking about gardening, and it again sort of stuck on my metaphor. Yeah, I'm just thinking about rich soil. What's in rich soil? And part of it is the soil is alive, and there's all these different things that are happening in that soil that make the garden flourish. If the soil is not alive, then you got to pump a lot of fertilizer, you got to pump a lot of other things in there. And so part of it being alive is it has many different creatures and entities and things that may seem to have no relationship to each other, yet combined they create something different. They create something, they transcend their individuality into this sort of mega entity.
It always comes back to gardening or being a parent. No matter what we're doing, it eventually comes back to either being a parent or gardening. I am sensing that we have backed out to the point where we can really start talking about the actions that we want to take. Let me go over what I've jotted down, which is only 5 pages of notes. In order for folks to take action, start new conversations, connect with others, feel personal agency, they need to be connected with in the ways that their brain works, whether it is the way that they learn, the way that they process. They need to see that things are possible. They need to see it in stories. They need to see it in examples that follow a wide range of circumstances and all sort of have the same ending. They need to be asked and engaged rather than lots of tell and push. They need to be brought into a conversation, especially if our goal is that they have conversations, that we model what we want them to be doing in the way that we express ourselves. They need to They need to know that there are others who are also stepping into a new way of thinking about things, seeing both unlikely and potentially likely allies, seeing those circles of influence, those circles of connectivity, see the potential ripples of what they are doing. They need, I wrote real life examples 1,700 times in these notes. They need to have messages link the new to the known. They need to have something that's new link very, very logically to their own experience. They need to have a reason to have those conversations in the first place, whether that's a level of excitement or a level of frustration that they're feeling. They need to feel empowered to build their own movements that again, relate questions to what they are currently doing. They need to see it in their own lens. They need language that makes sense to them and language that they can easily repeat. I love they need something that is too compelling not to miss. And just the comment that things are compelling if they're about me and not about just this generic thing. Is there anything else that that we think people need to hear, they need to know, they need to feel? Because I think that I'm feeling very ready to sort of turn those into start thinking about actions.
Yeah, I think one more, call to action, turning them into action, yes, but the call to action is something that I feel needs to be added to the how to connect with people. Okay, now what do I do?
Right.
Because what are the success measures? Because if ideally you don't even want to know, right? You just want it to be. But for now, is there a way to measure, I guess, social media engagement, right? I'm just thinking how you would measure whether or not your efforts were really, how you remain agile and tweak as you go along.
And I think that has to be absolutely both part of when we talk about actions. One of the factors when we do start talking about actions, but I also think that in terms of calls to action, that one of the things that people need to see and feel and know is there is something you can do right now. And that question that you asked, Roxanne, of what can I do? I think that's a really big thing. I think people need to know there is a thing you can do right now. And here's a thing you can try. Here's the thing you can do. But are the rest of you also feeling like we're ready to sort of dive in to be looking at actions? Are you feeling like any big thing is missing? Is there a sense that how about you, Peter?
I feel like we've made a lot of really good progress here and have really built up to taking this to the next step and actually talking about how we do it, right?
Yeah. And rather than start that at the end of this meeting, I think I'd like to just continue that and start it up tomorrow and really talk about, okay, what actions do we want to take? And this is exciting. What I would ask.
Talk about actions. Are you talking about the tactics that we're going to use, or what is your thinking in terms of how you're defining the actions?
Yeah. What are we going to do? All right, we know all this stuff now. What do we want to do?
There you go. Okay.
Hildy, is there a way to ask people what most resonates with them in terms of messaging?
Sure.
Because you have an audience, and so it would be reaching out to the people who engage with you anyway, and then just do a short survey around why you think this is so important, to get a sense of what rises to the top when you get your answers. Really just take that one that one commonality, maybe, if there is one, and there usually is when we do that. And use that when you start at your call to action and your emotional connection.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's reminding me that when we created our code of values and our statement of our values in action, the very, very first thing we did was we went out to our community and asked them, what do you think our values are? You've been watching us. What do you think our values are? How would you, what would you list? And it was awesome. It was awesome. You want to talk about how to measure success, Roxanne. The feedback that we got was exactly what we would have wanted to hear. So that was kind of nice to know that we were in fact walking that talk, because that's what people saw. But I think,
well, you have that. That's great. Maybe ask them what you can ask them to do. What could you ask them to do that, and because then that's the catalyst. Your words are perfect. That'll get them. That'll help you understand or better see how you can put people into action, or move people into action, I should say.
This is going to be a fun.
Oh, I know. I just can't participate, and I'm really, really
you can
sorry that I
watching it. You can participate by watching it afterwards and putting blog comments, and there's always ways to participate. So
I see that for sure.
So what I'm going to ask each of you to do right now is, if you took any notes, please take a look at them, circle anything that stood out. If you didn't take notes, let's take a deep breath, because this has been a big conversation. I would just love, what is standing out to you from our conversation today? What are you going to be taking into the rest of your day and noodling on?
So for me, the connection that I made, if you could see my desk, I have a string of Post-it notes up here with all these things on them. Like, anything mentionable is manageable, and just show up, and all these things. And what I wrote is, change is linking the now with the known. I don't know if one of your other catalytic thinkers thought that you mentioned that. And to me, that is such a beautiful incremental way to bring people into change versus asking them to step out into that space. So for me, that was an aha moment.
Yay. I need to reflect off of what you just said, bringing people into change rather than having them step out into it.
Right.
I love that imagery. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about how to blend the known with the unknown, and as we think about this tactically, because we're both trying to show people that this works and give them examples, but also asking them to take a leap of faith in something that really going to take them and everything they do in a new direction. So trying to figure out how to connect those two things in ways that are going to engage people to want to take part in this and do, and kind of spin it forward, I think is something I'm going to be giving a lot of thought to before we talk tomorrow.
Yay. Yay. And Magali just tweeted, the gross national happiness from Bhutan gives an idea to everyone that happiness is possible and reachable for everyone, saying that a gross national happiness dedicated to catalytic thinking would be great and a key to the ecosystem that you're designing. It's awesome. That is awesome. What is standing out to you, Dimitri and Roxanne?
Well, for me, it's about I'm stepping into change and just look. What does that look like? I think for me, I could relate it maybe to current circumstances, and instead of kind of walking through the fear, maybe walking into it because not it's something I'm mulling over, which I just think it's an amazing concept.
Yep. I like that. We do talk a lot about stepping through. That's that whole, I'm sorry, but the minute you said that, Roxanne, I pictured the Matrix where you've got to absorb it in order to get through it. And you really do.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Walk through the fire. Is that it?
That's it. Or embody the fire. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. That's great.
How about you, Dimitri? What is standing out?
Actually, these last few minutes have been really compelling. And I'm using that word because it's what is a compelling message. That's really what I've been thinking about. But in the context of what Peter was saying is, you know, the known to the unknown. You know, what is a compelling message for people to move in that direction and to take that in with them. So that I'm kind of leaving this meeting today and going to be thinking about that is what is compelling, and it's going to be different for everybody. And that's the part that I think is really interesting is there's no one message here. There's, you know, probably an infinite number of messages.
Yeah, and I'm not muted anymore. I'm struck by what Magali tweeted because the examples don't have to just be from creating the future. The examples of what's possible are out there, and again, it is why we are part of something. We're not leading. We are supporting something that already exists. And I'm loving the thought that the examples don't have to be our examples. The examples that we use and the stories that we use are stories that we all hear. And what encourages people to share stories of change they did go through that was awesome. And what did create that for them? What was at the heart of that? So that's really, I'm very glad that you're listening, Magali, and I'm very glad that you're here. And what is standing out for me in addition is how when we use catalytic thinking and we back out all of the conditions that need to be in place, we do get to, and so often folks who are new to this way of being and this way of thinking, you know, you're starting with this big airy fairy thing and you want the world to be an amazing place. And we're talking about all this stuff that just seems so big. And it just, you logically get to actions you want to take, stuff you want to do. And as so much of what we were talking about today was dancing around we could do this and we could do that and we could take a survey and we could tell the story and we could do, and you just know, the thing that I love is, this is the moment I love in this process, I just need to say, is when actions just become evident, when they just become clear, things you can do just sort of tell themselves, they say, I'm here, I'm standing here, you've been talking about me. And what I'm taking out of the room today is just feeling, it's going to sound weird, but I'm feeling a deep sense of calm, that this is going in this wonderful direction, that tomorrow we'll be able to just pick up the ball and run with it. And so I'm really just feeling very, very grateful to all of you for sparking, for being here. So thank you. And those who are watching and will be watching tomorrow, we will be back, not the same bat time, but the same bat channel. And I know that dates me, but deal with it, Batman people. Wonderful.
Thanks, Sylvie.
Yes. So feel better.
I will. I actually don't feel bad. I just sound horrible.
You sound bad. Usually
yeah.
you sound bad at the end.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is the end. So thank you guys for putting up with my creaky voice.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Roxanne, I'm so glad that you were here. And Peter, it is just a joy to walk this journey with you.
Likewise. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.